1.3 million patients a month wait 4 weeks or longer to see a doctor, which is simply not acceptable. People say to me all the time, you know, well, I would go to the doctors, but actually it's such a faff to try and get an appointment that I don't bother. As a result of that, many people actually don't get themselves sorted when they should. We spoke to Lord Bethell yesterday, who was pretty insulting, I think, to the general populace when he said, more or less, it's our doctrine in the NHS that is wrong. It's the people who have got healthcare wrong in this country, not the NHS, and it's not the NHS's fault that it doesn't work. Somehow it's something to do with politicians. And he was one. He was the health minister, for heaven's sake, under Matt Hancock. But let's talk to Martin to see what he makes of it all. Martin, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, here we are again. I mean, we could be talking about a new Alzheimer's wonder drug, which can slow the disease progression by 60%, and that's the good thing that the NHS can sort of garnish for itself, and it can say probably that, you know, some of the research that is done in this country for medicine and for medicines is some of the best in the world. But, of course, rolling out the availability of something like that becomes a problem because the NHS says, oh, well, we can't do it everywhere, we can only do it in some places. But let's talk just first of all about GP waiting times. 1.3 million patients a month waiting 4 weeks or more to see a doctor. It's not good enough, is it?
It's not good enough. And the trouble is, Mike, because the GPs work in an independent sector, they are privately owned businesses in the vast majority, and they work not on an employee basis with the NHS, but on a contract basis. The problem you've got is nobody, the government can't say, well, you've got to pull your socks up on this. They'll say, well, you know, how much more are you going to pay us? And we'll need a new contract to do this. I have to say, this is very patchy. I had calls to go to my GP recently, and I got 3 same-day appointments within a week.
Right.
And that was my local health service, which is good. You know, I can't complain, but I do understand, and I think particularly in some of the bigger cities, this is actually quite a problem, and a problem that I can't see being sorted out. I mean, again, Mike, if I can just make one quick point, there is an issue that in many GP surgeries, there are a lot of people who are wanting to see their GP who probably don't need to see them. That is what I hear from GPs.
Right.
And I've been hearing it right back to when I was an NHS chair back in 2020. They would say a third, perhaps even 40% of the people in that waiting room, they need to see a GP.
Right.
And some of them are very regular attenders.
And the problem with all of that, as you say, the difference between, say, a city possible surgery or a country one, is that in all places where there's kind of population growth, they haven't really expanded the numbers of doctors. So doctors are seeing more and more patients. They're getting more and more patients on their sort of roster, if you like, but they haven't really got time to spend any time with an awful lot of them.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I have a brother who's severely disabled. His GP surgery in Luton in Bedfordshire just closed. Just one day they all went away, and I think they went into the private sector. And another surgery took over the patient, but they were already overloaded with the number of patients they were serving. And it's taken a long, long time for him to get any kind of good, responsive service from his GP surgery.
I mean, isn't it time that somebody stood up and said, maybe the model isn't fit for purpose anymore, and maybe we need to change it?
Well, the model can go in one of two directions. I think the Labour Party are talking about bringing GPs into employment in the NHS. Well, good luck with that. Some of these are sitting on large packages of real estate. There's a whole number of issues there. These are private businesses. What are you going to pay them to take over their business? It has been done in some places. I know in the West Midlands, in 1 or 2 places it's been done. But actually, that's one direction. The other direction is to encourage the whole out-of-hospital service to embrace the private sector more effectively. We need more GPs. We also, though, do need, I understand to some degree what Lord Bethell said, even though he may have said it rather clumsily, that there is a little bit of educating to do of patients. Now, they are trying, in my surgery, they suggest that maybe if you've got a sore throat or a bad tummy, you maybe should go along to see the pharmacist. That's what you do in America, in many places. I've lived there, and going to the pharmacist was quite a normal thing for something relatively minor. So there are things that patients could do to help. But when I see 30 days or 28 days before I could see a GP, I mean, my response to that would be, well, look, I'm either going to be better by then or I'm going to be dead by then.
Well, that's right.
You know,
and a lot of people get put off being sort of visiting the pharmacy, because you get to the pharmacy and the pharmacy is overloaded with patients and you have to wait in line for about 10 people in front of you, and a lot of people just haven't got time to do that.
Well, no, it is better than 28 days, though, Mike. You know?
Well, I suppose so, but it depends. You know, if you've actually got a lunch break or something, and that's the only chance you've got to go to the pharmacy, and everybody else goes there at the same time, because not everybody has flexible working, you know, and you get there and you end up waiting for 45 minutes, and then they tell you, oh, we haven't got that, you'll have to come back later.
Well, a few years ago, I can remember a hospital not very far from me where if you went in at about 6 o'clock onwards in the evening, you would find a lot of people who commuted into London found it very difficult to see a GP anyway, and they were in the A&E, in desperation to see somebody.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, pretty soon you wouldn't be able to see a junior doctor for the last 5 days. Now you're going to have trouble finding a consultant because they're going out on strike.
Well, I think that is disgraceful.
Yeah.
I think the BMA, the next meeting they have, they should get round the table and hold their heads in shame, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely disgraceful. My own brother's a doctor. He would never, ever, the idea of going on strike would have been abhorrent to him. The BMA are leading these people in a bad direction, and actually I can't think that a very high proportion of our consultants are actually going to go on strike. I think a number will, but this is a politically driven strike. It is to get rid of the Tory, whatever they're called, and to make it as painful for people and patients as they can, to make it so horrible that they would like to welcome that nice Mr. Starmer in to sort everything out, probably in just a few days.
Right. But it won't, of course, be sorted out by Labour, because under Labour, traditionally, there are more strikes than there ever are under the Tories, because the unions then believe, well, now we've got a government that will actually do business with us, and we can ask them for even more than we've already got, and they'll give it to us. Well,
they may get some of it. Of course, under Blair, they got a lot of money, but of course it mainly went on salaries. Went on a ridiculous NHS salary structure that has been one of the things that's caused all the issues and the problems.
Right.
But the relationship between the consultants and the management in a lot of our hospitals isn't that good.
Right.
In fact, I've known in some places it's been quite acrimonious and unpleasant. I think that needs to be sorted out properly.
Right.
And the consultants going on strike, they're not going to get a lot more money. We've got an average, I think, of something like 128,000, 130,000 as their income. A lot of them are also working in the private sector, Mike.
Yeah, so they're making a lot more than that.
Quite a lot are. And the elective, the people who do the hip replacements and, the routine elective surgery, a lot of them work in the private sector. That reduces the capacity in the NHS anyway. But I tell you what, if they're working in the private sector and they go on strike, they'll give them a few more days to earn quite a bit more in the private sector. Yeah. It's like a suicide. Like they want to inflict as much damage on the NHS as they possibly can. And the BMA pontificate about, we want to give safer services, want to protect the future of the NHS. That's not their job to do that.
Also, nobody believes that anyway. I mean, because they really believed in the NHS and they really believed in safeguarding it, they wouldn't abandon it.
No, they're absolutely right. And we know what happened when, I can think back to the car industry, the coal industry, the steel industry. What happened when the unions decided to inflict as much damage as they could on their industry? Yeah. The industry went.
They killed it.
And thousands were made redundant,
Yeah, absolutely right. And this is what they don't get. And this is what's going to happen to all of these organisations that strike. Like the rail workers, the teachers, it'll all collapse in on itself.